We know what the sound of that is. That's Tibetan for pay attention. Welcome to First Parish Church in Northboro on a beautiful snowy day, right? It's going to get cold, so shovel your driveway. We've been here a long time in this building and in the spot of this building, and we're happy to be here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Hanukkah and a number of other things. I'm going to see if I can gather folks after church for just a quick little discussion about maybe social justice and maybe being a little bit more organized around the calendar year about things we do, particularly around Christmas gift giving and community meals and that kind of thing. It's also a day of sadness as we talk about Hanukkah, given what happened in Australia. If you don't know, 12 people, that's the present count at least that I've heard, have been shot in Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia. So poignant that we're talking about this. Obviously anti-Semitism and lots of things continue to thrive in this world, and I think we gather here to be a bastion of against that in general, right? I was just talking to Caroline on the way in. She was looking at me sternly, and I asked her if she was mad at me, and she said, the only way you can be mad at me is to be mean to someone. And I said, I don't intend on that, but there we go. So I try not to be mean, and I said, that's the summary of all the sermons you're going to get from me for the rest of the days. So don't be mean, you can all go home. Okay. So we're going to have a little social justice discussion afterwards. We're still gathering folks. I've got about 5 folks engaged in this. Kathleen and I are talking about engaging this book thing, A Protest History of the United States. That's probably going to start, I'm going to guess, sometime in February. Kathleen's also doing the cakes for the Queen of Heaven class. Does anyone have an announcement they want to jump in on before we get started? Karen, yeah.
On Wednesday night, the women of the church are invited to a celebration. It's going to be at Corey Woodcock's home for a potluck supper and then a solstice ritual afterwards.
What time is that?
Oh, yes, it starts at 6 o'clock. And if you need directions to her house, get in touch with her. And good luck.
Just quickly, I had a nice long conversation with Audrey last night. They're still going to a lot of doctor's appointments every day, and I know how draining that is, particularly for people in their 80s. And she still would appreciate some support with dinners. I am asking anyone who would like to participate in that effort to please let me know. I keep putting my contact information is in the perspective every week. So thank you if you can do something for that effort. She is gluten-free, and their menu preferences are primarily good old-fashioned American food.
Okay. There we are. Thank you, and we're going to turn it over to the prelude, and we're going to sing this song, which was ideally going to be a little bit more animated. This is a little bit of a solemn tone given the recent shootings in Bondi Beach. So, take it away, Olga. just always beautiful, isn't it? It really is. You're fabulous. Linda's going to come up and light our chalice, and she's also going to light the Advent, three of the candles for Advent. You're going to learn a little bit here in a minute. Tonight starts Hanukkah, but you don't start Hanukkah until the evening, so we would not light the first candle, although this is maybe arguably the first day of Hanukkah. Our chalice words are as simple as they can be. We are religious because we are born and we die. We are religious because living in those circumstances demands awe and humility, right? That's our chalice lighting. The first candle on the Advent wreath is, and then these lead up to, in case you're new to Advent, and they lead up to Christmas Eve. The purple candle is a prophecy candle, or a candle of hope. The second candle, also referred to as the Bethlehem candle, is a candle of preparation, means to sort of get ready. Advent has a get ready theme to it. And the third candle is the shepherd candle, or the candle of joy, and it's because the angels sang a message of joy. Cheating ahead, the fourth candle is a candle of love, also the angel candle. So Hanukkah, Advent, they sort of share the space most years. And thank you, Lynn. There we go. Our opening words, here we go. I want to stop for a second and just say how much Linda does around here. How about every once in a while we have to stop and praise the different people that are doing things, and Linda's just top of the list of people who do stuff all the time, jumping in worship in particular. A core part of being a Unitarian Universalist is more than a simple tolerance. It's a real commitment to learn about other faiths, other paths, other truths. It's sort of built into our DNA. Some of the early American founding fathers were the first to get into the Eastern religions. In many traditions, the path is clear. Whatever learnings, whatever blessings, whatever wisdom you get outside the faith is kind of a bonus, if not potentially a distraction. At the heart of our tradition is exploring and embracing and knowing the world is plural. Today, I suspect I will plan about every year I do something Hanukkah-ish usually, and we lift up the gift that is Hanukkah today, and like a wrapped present, we're going to shake it up a little bit, tip it over, listen to what it has in store for us inside. Hanukkah is, of course, as you'll hear and you know, sort of a celebration of some revolutionaries way back when, and it's also a window to human nature and a great story in history. So today is about the Maccabees, but it's also about a number of modern lessons that I think we can draw from it. So I'm going to light my own 8 candles during the period of the sermon. But as we all know, the punishment of the sermon is still a long way away, and I encourage you all to stand in spirit, if not in body, for our opening hymn, 391, Voice Still and Small. 391, gray hymnals. I love that little hymn. Pretty, isn't it? It really is. I encourage you to find a nice, still spot, breathe a little bit, I love the image of dropping down into your heart like on a rope ladder, sitting still there. Victoria Safford was a minister in St. Paul, Minnesota. She says, now this season is the moment of magic, when the whole round earth turns again towards the sun. Now is the moment of magic, when people beaten down and broken, with nothing left but misery and candles and their own clear voices, kindle tiny lights and whisper sweet music. Shared across a lot of traditions, I might add. And here is the blessing. The dark universe is suddenly illuminated by the lights of the menorah, suddenly ablaze with the lights of the Kinara, and the whole world is glad and loud with winter singing. Now is the moment of magic, when an eastern star beckons the ignorant towards an unknown goal. And here's the blessing. They find there nothing but an ordinary baby, born at midnight, born in poverty, and the baby's cry, like bells ringing, makes people wonder as they wander through their lives what human love might really look like, sound like, feel like. Now is the moment of magic. And here's a blessing. We already possess all the gifts we need. We've already received our presents, ears to hear music, eyes to behold lights, hands to build true peace on earth, and to hold each other tight in love. Let's take that sentiment into just a moment of appreciation for this season. It is our tradition to allow people to come forward and share what's on their hearts and minds, their joys, their concerns. And we do that now. People could generally line up over here. Draw the circle. Our offertory goes to split plate, half for the church, half to a group called WRAP, or Worcester Refugee Assistance Project. We were going to have the speaker come on the 7th of December. She is likely going to come sometime in May, but obviously Jesus is a refugee, immigration is a huge issue around the world. This group basically takes people who are recent immigrants, refugees, and helps them settle in 1,000 different ways, which is, of course, great work and an act of compassion. And we will hear from this group personally probably in the spring, but not before a silly story from me, as you know. So a Catholic priest, a Pentecostal minister, and a rabbi are debating about who's the most convincing preacher in town. They decide that the best way to test their skills is to find a neutral party and try to convert that party to their faith. But they live in a rural area and pretty much everyone in town is accounted for. They decide they're going to try to convert the local male bear. And in the great religious tradition of haughty clergy, of which I stand, the three of them all agreed to have a go at converting the bear to their faith. They decide they're going to give it a week and come back and see who was successful. So they reconvene. The Catholic priest and the Pentecostal firebrand arrive first. The Catholic says to the Pentecostal, well, I read to him from the prayer book. I stood away at a distance and sprinkled a little holy water on him. And although it was unclear that the bear got the message, overall the bear was pretty quiet through the experience. The Pentecostal preacher says, yeah, I had about the same level of success. I stood away back from the bear too, delivered a fiery sermon, and then threw a fish into the water to coax the bear over, and I called it a baptism. Wow, that's pretty creative, the priest says, when all of a sudden the rabbi comes stumbling in, all bandaged up, walking on a crutch, hobbling. His first words are, maybe circumcision was not the best way to begin. Give more generously than the bear for us and for the people at RAP. Now the choir. Choir.
So come across.
snuck in a reading I found that I thought set the theme of pluralism, and Pete's going to read it for us.
This reading is from Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel. There is one who sings the song of his soul, discovering in his soul everything, utter spiritual fulfillment. There is one who sings the song of his people, emerging from the primitive circle of his soul, not expansive enough, not yet tranquil. He strives for fierce heights. Then there is one whose soul expands until it extends beyond the border of Israel, singing the song of humanity. His spirit spreads, aspiring to the goal of humankind, envisioning its consummation. Then there is one who expands even further until he unites with all existence, with all creatures, with all worlds, singing a song with them all. There is one who ascends with all these songs in unison, the song of the soul, the song of the nation, the song of humanity, the song of the cosmos, resounding together, blending in harmony, circulating the sap of life, the sound of holy joy.
Emerson, famous Emerson, gave his, and I think it's 1828, he gave his famous Harvard Divinity School address, and he chastised the clergy, and he talked about a day when he sat in church, and he looked outside at the beautiful falling snow, and he complained about the boring minister that was up there talking about historic old things, and while he was missing the miracle of the day. So I encourage you to look outside, ignore me, and enjoy the miracle of life. But you still got to listen to the sermon, or at least sit there politely. This sermon has a simple structure to it. It lays out the moment that Hanukkah commemorates. Having basically covered the historical moment, it lay out a little how the holiday came to be. Today's a little history lesson, and what it means and how it's shifted, which I think is just good information for a good UU. Then I'll culturally appropriate the idea of Hanukkah's 8 candles for my own sequences of Hanukkah's lessons. Throughout the sermon, as a symbol of violence inherent in the origin of this basically holiday, I will hold a sword, like the Maccabees. But unlike the Maccabees, I'm not expecting to use it. But if any of you are going to fall asleep, capiche? All right, there you go. In a way, Hanukkah is simple. In fact, I believe in one sentence, a lower run-on sentence, I can give it to all the goys out there to basically give you an explanation. Here we go. Hanukkah commemorates the moment the Maccabees, a band of Jewish revolutionary warriors, liberated the temple in Jerusalem in 165 BC or BCE from the occupying forces of the Assyrian Greek army, and in an effort to purify the sacred temple, lit a surprisingly, perhaps miraculously long burning oil lamp. That's a 10-cent run-on answer. You should know at least that much. I'm going to do it one more time. Listen. Here we go. Hanukkah commemorates the fateful moment a band of Jewish revolutionary warriors, they were fighters, liberated the temple in Jerusalem from the occupying forces of the Assyrian Greek army, and following his ritual demanded it, lit an oil lamp that miraculously burns long enough to declare the temple purified. Add to your mental archive under Jewish holidays the following: 8 days of gifts, 1 gift a day, and there's something about potato pancakes too secret for a UU minister to understand. Something about European roots, I don't know. That's a pretty good gulp of it to choke down. If it's all you want to know, you have permission to stare out the window at the snow, or quietly dip down into your phone, or fiddle with a dreidel, mentally review your holiday gift list. That's the 50-cent view. Here it goes. a little deeper view. This takes place 165 years before the Common Era, so thus with Christian roots and thinking about that time scale. That's almost 2 centuries, almost exactly, within 5 years or so, of when Jesus was crucified by a different occupying army, the Romans, if that helps. 3 years prior to the liberating victory that Hanukkah talks about and commemorates, the Greek-Assyrian army in Jerusalem, led by King Antiochus, who appears in the Bible as a bad guy, had already been in the area controlling people and generally behaving like every empire ever has since Alexander the Great swept through nearly 2 centuries before. And by that, pretty badly. Empires have a bad track record. However, under King Antiochus, the stakes were raised for political reasons too ornate to get into, or basically because I don't understand them all. The religious heat was turned up on the rebellious Jews in Jerusalem. And an act of trying to take over the culture and the Jewish people and to rub their noses in it as to whose God was really running the show, they basically turned over the temple in Jerusalem to the worship of Zeus. Most people don't really know that. Yeah, the petulant lightning bolt throwing Zeus was honored in the sacred Jewish temple. And you can imagine, I took our picture, what it might be like for a Jew to walk into their temple and see a statue of Zeus. It would be the ultimate indignant act, right, to do that. It wasn't the only thing that the Greek-Assyrian army did either. They basically literally forced Jews to bow down to idols and to eat the flesh of pigs as a way to break their spirit and a way to just insult them. Now, before you even try to spell dreidel, 2 things even most Gentiles know is expressly forbidden in Jewish law are those 2 things, the eating of pigs and the bowing of idols. Not very nice of the Greeks, far worse even than the desecration of pizza that they've done. Needless to say, the Jewish people were not happy with the change, but like all oppressed people do, like all people in America you see today and around the world, they responded in a number of predictable ways in certain percentages, right? Some went along keeping their heads down for fear of losing them. Others actually willingly adopted Greek ways and thought, hey, baklava, not bad. Some others argued that some compromise was appropriate, and some rebelled, taking up arms. Just like in every oppressed group of people, there's that panorama of responses. The Maccabees, like all good revolutionaries on their own turf, they were the revolutionaries, they were the rebels, they used their intimate geographic knowledge and easy ability to blend back into their own people to sneak attack in a bunch of rebel assaults, not unlike the American Revolution, as you might be watching on PBS. Like the Afghans following the Soviets, like the Taliban fighting the US, like George Washington and the American Patriots, like the Viet Cong, these tactics and homegrown knowledge were pretty effective. As all above invaders know, it's hard to battle an army that disappears into the surrounding hills or even more sneakily just fits right back into society again. So the patriotic band of these Jewish revolutionaries made progress, but they couldn't really oust the Greeks, who had a much bigger army. Their leader, Matthias, maybe not even pronounced right, he grew old and eventually died. Fortunately for the rebellion, insurrection in that family was a family business, and his son Judah Maccabee, from where the name the Maccabees come from, he carried on. They called him the Hammer. Judah the Hammer. And he fought the occupying forces and, despite overwhelming odds, overtook the temple, right? The sacred kind of like spot where you defend. Fort Sumner, that kind of place. But when they took over the temple, they found the temple destroyed, sacred altars were broken, they basically, precious objects were stolen, typical warlike behavior, and the lamp that continually remained lit as a sacred act of God's spirit in the room was snuffed out. According to legend, Judah Maccabee and his men cleaned up the temple and looked everywhere for the sacred oil, the sacramental oil that would need to light the temple and sort of the act of purifying it, which took some time. 8 days, in fact. So there was just one little container that hadn't been ruined, and they expected it would be enough for basically a day, maybe a little more. It wasn't. They lit it. They crossed their fingers like people in dire straits do, people hoping beyond hope do, and they prayed. And as an act of faith, they lit the lamp, and it remarkably remained lit one day, then the next day, and then the next day, until the temple was officially cleansed and they could kind of move back in and take it over. From this act, Hanukkah, which literally means dedication, was born. In that symbolic moment, Jerusalem was thought freed from the Greek rule. That's the history that leads to the celebration of Hanukkah that we celebrate today. In the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, the events of Hanukkah are referred to as the Feast of Dedication, in case you encounter that in your deep scriptural readings, which I know you're all doing in your spare time. That's the dollar version of the holiday. Here's a $10 version of the holiday right here. Long before dreidels, potato pancakes, and 8 daily gifts came to children around this time of year, Hanukkah was about remembering this Jewish underdog story. The holiday that emerged from the event was concerned with lifting up what had been called 2 miracles. The first being that after all these years of oppression, this small group of Israeli guerrilla fighters basically kicked out the army. The second being the long, miraculously burning oil. However, as accurate it is to say, it is not sufficient. See, any real study of the holiday, as any good holiday can ruin a holiday, right? It needs to mention that Hanukkah is the only Jewish holiday not mentioned in the Hebrew Bible that most Christians would have some kind of understanding about. And that's a bit odd because as a group of people who trace their history back to nearly the start of recorded history, Hanukkah is, for the most part, a virtual new kid on the block of Jewish holidays. Even today, it technically remains a minor holiday. It's not anti-Semitic to say it, that we're probably talking about Hanukkah here today in the 21st century in a church that has Christian origins because of its proximity to Christmas. I think that's interesting enough. But Hanukkah's not only shapeshifted to parallel Christmas, it's equally interesting that the journey it went on was hardly pure. Ready to get your historical geek on? The holiday itself actually arises not so much from the brave actions of the Maccabee soldier warriors, but of the discussions about them. A closer look at the history tells us that from the Jewish tradition of recording its great rabbinic debates, as anyone following Jewish history knows, commiserating and fighting about matters is as Jewish as anything is. And the recorded debates and reflections about the book and the Talmud really birthed Hanukkah as a holiday. See, and even closer than most rituals will be willing to admit, the most miraculous part of the story, in fact, its ritual center, reflected in the long-lasting oil, mainly comes out of the tradition of talking about it more than something that necessarily historically happened. Said simply, the idea that there was a miraculous 8-day burning of 1 day amount of oil is broadly thought today by scholars to be, in addition to the holiday, a focus and an exaggeration and an expansion of just a simple passing reference that led them and took the holiday away from the focus on the Maccabees, which is what the Talmud and those discussions wanted to do. The early rabbis were wary of celebrating the Maccabees too much because of after their courageous victory, the leadership had more of a hint of resemblance to what we might call the Taliban's rule in Afghanistan than we might want to know. Essentially, the historical record indicates that the Maccabees remained stubborn and zealous in their nature. It served them so well as fighters for the purity of their temple and their people, and subsequently forced everyone in Israel, something that had never happened before, to try to make everyone Jewish. The Maccabees forced people in Israel to become Jews, and it's that very focus that twisted the rabbis' attention back to the oil. It was a way to reclaim this holiday that had become popular from a group of people who weren't so popular anymore. The rabbis seemed to think that such a violent parable would be too destructive to celebrate. At different times and for different reasons, these two miracle stories have competed for the sort of center stage in the holiday. For Zionists, it's the Maccabees. For more peaceful times and peaceful, it's the oil. Grace, God's grace at work. However, in the 20th century, as I said, it was for the Zionists returning to the Promised Land. That was important. It's worth a pause. It's also that the meaning of Hanukkah is now more commercial and a parallel to Christmas as only one of its evolutions. All that means is that what we do and revise to our history is as important as it is that we celebrate them. Think about that. We have to constantly revise the story of ourselves, don't we? To meet the moment, so it's not some archaic piece of history that we're bound to that we cannot grow from. America needs to remember and know this, of course. And in that spirit, I want to add a little twist to this, and in no disrespect for the Jewish tradition. We don't light the menorah, but I'm going to light this menorah with the lessons that I think Hanukkah really leaves us with if we give it as much thought as we can. So, there's this samash, the center candle. It's the light of all the candles. And this goy, this Samaritan of sorts, is going to learn from Handel. So these are the lessons that I picked up. Candle 1. And I'm not going to use the samash to light it. I'm just going to light each one. Apparently from right to left. At least that's what I understand. Candle 1 is about religious freedom and diversity. The victory of Hanukkah was, of course, a victory for religious independence, which we need to celebrate. I light the candle because it is embodied in Hanukkah, however you want to spell it, there's 3 ways you can spell it, is the lesson that no one should ever walk or have to force to give up their own ritual acts against their will to some oppressor god. Candle 1, never. Religion should be freely chosen and evolve on its own without oppression. Candle 2, power corrupts, right? Hanukkah's second modern lesson for us, I think, is a warning that we humans have a long habit of being bad to one another. Candle 2 is an acknowledgement of our sneaky and not so sneaky desire to want power and of wanting to impose our will on others. Said another way, is Hanukkah is a great parable to examine for the almost insidious proclivity of us to want others to see the world in the way that we do. As a rock band, The Who reminds us, the Maccabees were like that song, Meet the New Boss, same as the old boss. The second Hanukkah candle is a warning to that instinct among us, which leads us to our third modern lesson from the Hanukkah candle. All heroes are imperfect. Right? Isn't that true? In the Hanukkah story, we hear evidence of imperfect heroes. I think the Jewish tradition, better than most, embodies that nature, from Jonah, who didn't want to be a prophet, to David, who sent off his best friend to be killed because he was sleeping with his wife. Jacob plays dirty tricks on his dad. The Jewish tradition has this great capacity to have heroes that are imperfect and broken in their own way. Think about that in contrast to the honest complexity over and against the unflappable, perfect Jesus. Kudos to the Jews for being brave enough to give us imperfect heroes. Candle 4, underdogs. We like them. Should be rooted for. It's simple. Hanukkah reminds us that deep-seated in the human heart is the love of a good underdog story. In Hanukkah, we get to watch a group of people who were enslaved by the Egyptians, exiled by the Babylonians, taken over by the Greeks, grab a little bit of unexpected revenge. For me to really celebrate Hanukkah, Jew or not, you have to know how good it feels down in your bones to know that a kick-butt victory, when it is unlikely, is always possible, and the Maccabees beat a larger, better trained, better army, wealthier opponent who were rubbing their nose in it. Yay, Maccabees. Candle 5, the end of exclusive storytelling. We as a world need to stop exclusively telling stories as if they were the only ones that mattered. Single perspectives need to go. So I light this fifth candle to the danger of single storytelling. Hanukkah, when fully examined, gives us the opportunity to look at things from multiple perspectives and across history. For example, given the perspective of perspective that we have historically, we can see that the Great isn't exactly what the Jews might have called Alexander, and the exploits in empire building. To the Jews, Alexander was no more a colonial oppressor than anyone else was. Likewise, to the more cooperative Jews, just trying to keep the peace, and to the rabbis that followed the Maccabees, they were respectively, the Maccabees turned into violent loons. And let's not forget that to the Greek soldiers who lost their lives battling for Jerusalem in a foreign land, they were probably just trying to feed their families too. Jerusalem was probably just a mercenary assignment for most people in that space from afar. The exclusivity with which this story gets told should oddly help us to realize how much a more global, pluralistic perspective is required. We naturally know we must step into others' sandals to broaden truth, which leads naturally to the candle 6, that things are inherently complex. I'm almost done. Even the moment memorialized across time, we can look back on and see that there was literally infighting, bloodshed even, among the Jews themselves. Factions from the moderate Hellenizers, Hasmoneans, Hasidim, Pharisees had their own perspectives all along. During the time Hanukkah took place, the Hasidim dropped out because they didn't want to be involved in the compromises necessary to follow in Judea in a Hellenized world. At the same time, ultra-pious Hasids believed that what was required for Jewish celebration and salvation was more meticulous and passionate devotion. Other groups thought other ways. Candle 6 is for the hard truth that the world is complex, and even in the middle of celebrating a miracle, a variety of perspectives will be present. 7, irony. Irony lives and thrives in this world. Get used to it. Why can't I light these candles? How ironic. The next lesson I draw from Hanukkah is perhaps my favorite. For if we, 2,200 years later, get from the single-minded Maccabees, is the fact that the world is complex and a dangerous thing that people only see from one perspective is ironic. See, if the only Jewish holiday most Jews can really name is a minor holiday that barely gets mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, and it's Hanukkah's proximity to Christmas that means we're celebrating it today to some degree, who can argue that irony is alive in the world? Think about it. The Maccabean rebellion was a life and death struggle against the assimilation of Jews into Greek culture. And yet now, it is in a very intentional effort to be pluralistic and compassionate, we dedicate a service every couple years or so to honor the zealots who created it, in an effort to be those like us. Laughing or not, Hanukkah does provide a big fat lesson in irony. Pushing the twist even further, we should consider that most scholars suggest Hanukkah in fact has roots in the ancient pagan festivals that celebrate light at the darkest times of years. So, in that sense, its roots are pagan and its roots are connected to Christmas. Moreover, Matthias would be turning over his grave to know that its history was first recorded in Greek by the Greek-speaking assimilist Jewish community that then survived in the Christian world. So, the world's complex and the world's ironic. And the last candle, like one of the Advent candles, is for hope. Which we seem to struggle with here. Our last candle of hope. When Judea and his warriors lit that candle, they could see it would not be enough They exemplified hope. Hanukkah to me teaches that even though life is complicated and the odds can be against us, we must begin with the act of what we have in front of us. Hanukkah teaches me that although life offers no assurances, to refuse to light that candle of hope and is to allow hopelessness is to really to defeat us. And that is a defeat we cannot afford. You've suffered enough. Amen. Our closing hymn, please stand in spirit, if not in body or in both, is Light One Candle, 221 in our gray hymnals. Light one candle. Just kind of like to hold it. Our closing words come from Jerry Seinfeld, who says, "I believe I can sum up Jewish history in 9 words. You tried to kill us, you failed, let's eat."
Philip Glass is an American composer of Lithuanian, Jewish, and Russian Jewish descent. Very hot for the past 10 years.
Yeah. Plays a lot of real weird music.
Yeah, it's minimalist, it's called.
That's just showing off. I mean, come on.